Hey everybody, Mowers and Blowers here again on a wintry Long Island day. We just got about 5 inches or so, not a big deal, and it hardly stuck. Anyway, it is getting colder though, so it's going to be more difficult for me to work on my equipment. Nevertheless, this was the yard bug that I got in the Motherlode 2-pick, I believe. And, I got this for 50 bucks. And one of the initial complaints with it was that the starter didn't work. It kind of like always shorted out and stuff. So, I was hesitant to try it, but I did reinstall that starter that the owner told me about that, was defective. And, for a while it actually worked. It started up, I used it and drove it around. And then one time, it wouldn't start. It started a little, but it just like continued to crank when I wasn't cranking, And so smoke started billowing out, and I fried some of the wires. Thank goodness it wasn't the little wires, but it was basically just the solenoid to the starter wire, and also the negative to engine block wire was all melted. So what I did was I took some other wire that I reconnected it, but I have a feeling the gauge is not as good, It's not as thick as the original. So what I did was I ordered some new battery cables, cable wire, which is the correct gauge, 6 gauge, and I'm going to reinstall some new wires. These are pretty cheap on eBay. There were, for two, I believe they were 18 bucks or something, so that's pretty cheap. Well, maybe it was less, I'm not even sure. Anyway, so this was the starter in question. I attached a hot wire from my battery charger, positive over here, and then I did negative over here, and it just sparked a lot. So I'm feeling that this is dead, So I ordered a new one on eBay, and this was a good deal. Guy selling it on eBay told me it was a working starter, and I got it for $18. So that's a pretty good deal. So I installed that already. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace this cable, the battery to ground cable, and I'm going to replace this one here, which is the solenoid to starter cable, because I don't, this wire here is not the correct gauge, so it when I try to turn it on, it just clicks like this. Or, yeah, I'll show you. Okay. See? But just to be 100% sure, while I'm going to switch out the gauge cables, I also bought a new solenoid. That was cheap. It was only 8 bucks. So I didn't want to spend any money on this thing, but I love it so much, and I've already made my money like 20 times over with the sale of the two or three lawnmowers that I had with this deal. So I'm way ahead of the game. I mean, I'm up like $200-300 just on that sale alone, so I don't mind spending some money just to get my yard bug going. But anyway, so that's my project today, is to change the solenoid and switch out some solenoid to battery to starter cables, so that now I have a new starter, supposedly it works, a new solenoid, and new cables to those two items. So theoretically, this should start and run great, because I have supposedly fixed the issues with the starting. So it's quite cumbersome to get to that nut over there, for that hole over there for the ground wire. I'd have to remove the entire bracket over here. It was a shield that covers prevents the battery from touching the starter. So, and then I had to take the battery out too. So it was kind of a pain just to get to that nut, Anyway, so I'm gonna get that black wire now, and I'm gonna do it one at a time, so I don't mix up the connections. So I've got myself a pickle here. this bolt is stripped. Not this bolt, but actually in there is stripped. So the battery to ground bolt is not going to have a good connection. So I need to find another bolt that's just a little bit wider than this, so it has a tight connection. Gonna have to find another bolt. Okay, so I managed to get another bolt in there. Not really 100% confident that that's tight enough, but definitely tighter than before. I'm just gonna try it. So that goes to the battery negative terminal. Here's the positive terminal that leads to the left side of that solenoid. I didn't change the solenoid because I wanted to test to see whether or not that was busted or not. I changed the right side red cable. That goes to the starter. So got 2 new cables on there, pretty tight. And I'm just going to connect the battery, see if it turns over. So I just tried it, and all I get is this. Not quite sure what's wrong with it now. I guess the solenoid's busted, but would it click if it was busted? Maybe it'll click, it was just not touching, you know? So I think the next step is to change the solenoid, or maybe I should attach a current to the starter and see. Maybe I should do that. So I just connected a battery cable, my battery charger, to the ground, and I'm going to touch the starter. Okay, so we know the starter works. I think it's the solenoid. I'm going to change solenoid now. So of course it couldn't be easy for me, as I got the new solenoid on there. While tightening this bolt, the bolt snapped in half. So now I'm screwed. See? Brand new solenoid, just turning it tight, and just snapped. What a piece of junk. So now I don't know what to do. So far this thing has been the death of me. Just spent like an hour just barely sucking out any bit of that stripped screw post, and then getting a nut on there and squeezing that cable in there. So I think I got it. It took me long enough. I'm going to give it a try. About damn time. Alright, took me long enough. We got this thing figured out. Now I'm going to put all this stuff back and call it a day. Man, that sucked. See you guys next time on Mowers and Blowers.